Hi, everybody.
Hey.
We're the Swingles.
Hi.
And we're so excited to be part of the ChoirFest Middle East e-learning program. We're coming to you from isolation in our homes, and we've still been working together. So today we're bringing you a short workshop. We're going to play you one of our videos that we've made during lockdown recently, and work through a bit of how the Swingles work. We'll hand over to John to tell you a bit about the process of making the video.
Yeah, so obviously it's been a crazy time and we can't be together in person. So we've decided to try to keep making as much music as possible. So we've been doing virtual videos, just like lots of other groups all around the world. It's a wonderful way for us to sort of feel connected together, still feel like we're making music, but also still connecting with all of you and our audiences all around the world. So we basically all have to record our parts individually. We send out a sort of track with a metronome so that we know we can all stay in the same time. And then after recording that all gets sent to one person to put it all together. And then we record ourselves via video so that we can then put the video and the audio together. And it almost sort of looks like this in the end, although this is just a Zoom call. But yeah, we thought we would play the Weather to Fly video for you. And then afterwards, we'll explain a bit more about the swingle sound and also some percussion that we do in the piece as well.
We had the drive and time on our hands, one little room and the biggest of plans. The days were shaping up frosty and bright, perfect weather to fly, perfect weather to fly. Pounding the streets where my father's feet still ring from the walls, we'd sing in the doorways or bicker and row, just figuring how we were wired inside, perfect weather to fly. So in looking to stray from the line, we decided instead we should pull out the thread that was stitching us into this tapestry vile. Why wouldn't you try, perfect weather to fly? We had the drive and time on our hands, one little room and the biggest of plans. The days were shaping up frosty and bright, perfect weather to fly, perfect weather to fly. Pounding the streets where my father's feet still ring from the walls, we'd sing in the doorways or bicker and row, just figuring how we were wired inside, perfect weather to fly. So in looking to stray from the line, we decided instead we should pull out the thread that was stitching us into this tapestry vile. Why wouldn't you try, part of the perfect weather to fly? Are we having the time of our lives? Are we having the time of our lives? Oh, are we having the time of our lives? Are we coming across? Are we having the time? Are we coming across? Fine. Are we part of the plan here? Are we having the time of our lives? Are we having the time of our lives? Are we coming across? Are we coming across? Are we coming across? Are we part of the plan here? Are we having the time of our lives? Are we having the time of our lives? Are we coming across? Are we coming across? Are we coming across? Are we part of the
So something you may have noticed about that video is the way we're singing it. And we wanted to chat a little bit about our approach to things like phrasing, shapes, vowels, diphthongs. And for this arrangement, there's a particular word that we use. In groups of like friends or family, you'll sort of notice that there'll be a word or a catchphrase or a quote or a joke, you know, an in-joke that a reference that becomes part of your everyday conversations and interactions. And the same can be said for us in a rehearsal space. And we come up with these terms that we use the whole time. And for this particular arrangement, we use the word speechy or speech-like. And what we mean by that is that we want it to sound really conversational, you know, so the way we would say the phrases, the way we'd say the words is the way we sing them. And as a singer or as a choral singer, you often learn about a way to shape or place a vowel. And for this, we sort of ignore that a little bit and we make it far more speech-like or conversational. And it's still a healthy production style of singing, but it takes it to a different genre from something like opera or other types of classical music. And this arrangement is all about communicating these sorts of words all together, you know, so we make particular choices about where to scoop, where the important words in the phrase are. And for example, the word frosty, we've all decided to make it sound a little bit frosty by adding a bit more air into things like that. And then later on in the arrangement, it becomes a little bit more pop-like, a little bit more belt comes in. But ultimately, we're trying to all communicate the same words in the same way.
We hope you enjoyed that little recording of Whether to Fly. We had loads of fun putting that together in isolation. It's a bit of a challenge for all of us. We hope in the middle of that you may have spotted a couple of our percussion sounds, particularly from Joe, who we'll come to in a second. But we've heard that you've already maybe seen a couple of videos introducing you to a bit of vocal percussion already. And you'll be able to tell if you go and look at loads of the Swingle back catalogue that drums are such an enormous part of what we do, and it gives a huge amount of groove to our tracks. What I'd like to do is a really quick recap on the sounds you may have covered already. So we'll start with the bass drum, which you might remember is the P sound, which goes, your turn. And then let's do a couple more of those. Great, and the next one you would have done is the hi-hat, which is the TS hi-hat. Difficult one there. Great, let's put a couple of those together. So. Good. And you would have moved on to the PF snare, which is a little bit of a tough one, a little bit harder to work on. This sounds like this. Let's have a go. Let's see if we can put that into concept. This one might take a bit of practice, so I hope you've been practicing in your own time. Your turn. 1, 2, off you go. Good. Let's see if we can get the slightly more complicated one. Now, this one you may have covered before is known as a rimshot. So this is where you use the drumstick to hit the side of the snare drum. And this is that little K sound that goes like this. Your turn. Good. Let's see if we can put that together. This one takes a little bit of practice. So. Let's try a hard one. Did you manage it? Hope you did. Keep practicing. Good sounds. And there was one final sound you will have covered, which is the big crash cymbal that we often have right at the end of a big old drum fill in between sections. And this is the PSH sound, which goes like this. Your turn. Just one more of those, because that's my favorite one. And there's an unwritten rule in beatboxing that you have to move around whenever you're doing beatboxing or vocal percussion. So let's do it one more time with the movement, please. Thank you. Good. This is just me making silly noises on my own in my bedroom. This is great fun. Hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. So what I'm going to ask Jo to do is talk a little bit about the inward K snare and the riff that you hear in Whether to Fly, which she'll be able to talk loads about. So Jo, over to you.
Yeah, so the inward snare is a slightly more electronic sounding version of a snare hit. So instead of that PF sound that we just practiced, it's a kind of release of air inwards. It sounds like this. So essentially what's happening is that your tongue is against the back of your top teeth and against the sides, and you release the sides, and it's the air rushing inwards that creates the sound. Give it a go. 1, 2, 3. And you make a silly face just like that. Yeah, it's a really cool sound. It was actually taught to me by a female beatboxer known as Bellatrix. She is still, I believe, the #1 female beatboxer in the world. And she spent a lot of time about 10 years ago, no more than that, 14 years ago, teaching me how to do that sound. And I still can't do it particularly well, but if you hear her do it, it's absolutely amazing. But in the case of Whether to Fly, we've added it into a beat that sounds a little bit like this. Just like that. So it's incorporating some of the sounds that Jamie's already taught you with that little inward snare as well.
Great. So Ed, and I'd like you to, if you would, for those of you that have gone to see a few of our other tracks on YouTube, you'll notice that we do lots of music, everything from really early music by Bach, which is the famous fugue that I hope you've heard, and all the way through to stuff that we're in the middle of writing at the moment. And obviously there's loads of sounds that go into that. Ed, could you talk a little bit about our kind of jazz brush sound and our shakers, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a shaker sound that actually features in the Whether to Fly arrangement as well, and it's passed around between several of us. So I do it at the beginning, and then Jo does it a bit later on, and John does it. Interestingly, I think we all make the sound in slightly different ways to get the same effect, which is kind of a lesson that, you know, it's totally fine to experiment with your own ways of making these sounds, because everybody's got a different face, a different mouth, and frankly, whatever works for you and whatever sounds good to you is cool and worth doing. But the way that I make this shaker sound is basically with an F, letter F for frog. So if you imagine this kind of constant thin stream of air coming out with a, so you've got this kind of constant F, and then I'm doing little tiny pushes of air on every small beat, so every quaver in this song, which is like, and then I'm also putting slightly bigger pushes of air on the more important beats, so that's like, I'm kind of using, to make those little pushes of air, I'm kind of using like a glottal stop, which is like the part of your back of your throat that's working when you go so it's like a silent sound in combination with that F that just makes a and that's how I do a shaker sound. Some people when they do it will kind of do a combination of out breaths and in breaths. For me, I find that that can be quite exhausting and makes me feel quite short of breath. So I just do it all on an out breath until I'm out of air, and then I take I sneak a nice big in breath where I can, and then just start again. Now, related to this is the jazz brushes sound that you hear in a lot of Swingle's arrangements. When the group started out way back in the 1960s, they played with a real rhythm section, so a drummer and a bass player. And the drummer spent most of his time playing brushes on a jazz snare drum. So the way that these sounds work is normally the drummer will use one of the brushes, which is like, you've probably seen them, but they've got sort of metal wire on them. He'll just use that to sweep around the surface of the drum, and again it'll make a sort of constant brushing sound, and then he'll use the other drum to hit accents. So the effect that you get is like a so this is pretty similar to the shaker sound in the sense that I've got a constant little stream of air on an F sound, and then this time for my accents I'm doing like a bit like a T sound. If you think of the word tough but without the vowels, it's like so combining that accent with the constant, and you get a and this works at almost any tempo. You can do a really kind of chilled out mellow jazz thing, like, or you can do a super fast swing. Yeah, so that's jazz brushes.
Great. And to leave you with just a couple more sounds, we've got a few of the less conventional sounds. A lot of what we talked about so far is kind of drum kit based, and there's one more sound that a lot of people will associate with kind of 80s music, which is a really huge snare sound. And I like to think of this as a DV snare. And this is when you want a really enormous sound, which when you've got a mic right up to your mouth as well, gets even bigger. So this final one is, all you need to do is say DV really loudly with a nice big push behind it. So, your turn. Good. And this is, you need a little bit of an explosion of air behind the lips before you do that. With the V, and you can really hum on that V to get a really big push of sound. Let's try it one more time. There we go. And this is used in loads of the 80s tracks. If you go and have a listen to our Red Rain, you'll hear that almost all the way through, and it just gives this gives the track this enormous feeling. So that's one to go and have a play with. The last one, which is probably one of my favorite sounds, and is deceptively simple to get right, is known as the lip bass. We do this in Nana, which is this wonderful track which uses loads of our live looping, and is really good fun because I get to do lots of different layers of percussion all on top of each other. And this, I like to think of this, almost imagine you're making a motorbike noise to start with, and it's just, and what you can slowly begin to do by squeezing the sides of your mouth, you can gradually begin to pitch it and turn it into this huge bass. And if you do get a chance to experiment on a microphone with this, it gives you this enormous foundation of sound underneath everything else. So let's try that a couple of times. I'll have a go. Go. Now, hopefully you haven't just covered your screen in spittle. It's one to certainly go away and practice, but this is probably one of my favorite sounds. In fact, I'll try and combine this in the rhythm that we have in Nana, the track that uses this a lot. And this will use the K Snare that Joe talked about. And you could experiment with adding in some hi-hats if you like as well. So, have a go at that in your own time. I'll leave you to go and experiment with that one. So there is a little overlay of some of the sounds we use in lots of the Swingle tracks. It's been, as I say, I'm the youngest of the Swingles so far, having only been in the group for 3 months, and it's been great fun playing around with all of these sounds, some of which I didn't know until only a few months ago. So this is really good fun, and I'd like to echo as well what Joe said, which is go and have a play, experiment with all the sorts of crazy sounds you can make. You might even surprise yourself. That's half the joy of doing vocal percussion, that you can try and copy sound, you can make up your own and really go and have a play. So thanks so much for this. We will now all come back together for a very quick goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We are going to send you the sheet music for our song Whether to Fly. And if you want to listen back to the YouTube video and have a go at some of the Swingle sounds we've talked about, and record your own version in isolation, we'd love to hear it. We hope you're all doing really well and you're staying safe and happy. And we'd love to work with you in person in the future. So thanks for coming along and nice to meet you all. Bye.
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 See you soon.